Hello, I'm Brigantia Blackbird. Happy Friday. It's time for something light and breezy today. We're going back to our series for the Romance and Modern Mythology, and today's installment is super fun. It's Crowley and Aziraphel. And to begin with, may I just say, whatever gods or gods might be listening, bless Neil Gaiman and Terry Pratchett for the novel Good Omens, and for all the people who gave us the Good Omens miniseries in 2019. It's fun, it's adventurous, it's kooky, it has a fun take on Judeo-Christian mythology that's very refreshing. It's just a good time. I mean, they made everything about it fun. Even the theme song to begin each episode. It's like a Halloween waltz between two really awkward partners, which I think is a really good metaphor for the characters of Crowley and Aziraphel. But the story of Good Omens is about the biblical Armageddon, which is happening any minute now, and the misadventures that led to, the big showdown with the Antichrist. So the forces of heaven and hell, they're just rearing to go, and they're super enthusiastic to square off in accordance with the great plan, the divine plan, and they've been waiting for this for centuries, and it's going to be so excited for them. But caught in the middle of all of these proceedings, besides, the whole rest of the world, are the demon Crowley and the angel Aziraphel. Now, all this time, they've been on assignment in Earth. In the beginning, Crowley, he was sent by hell to go up and make trouble in the garden, and he obliged. He was the one who, shifted into the snake and tempted Eve to take a bite out of the apple, and then she gave it to Adam, and then, of course, that resulted in the first humans having to leave Eden. Not really the degree of trouble he was anticipating, but, he fulfilled the assignment. Hell was happy. And then we have Aziraphel, who was also in the garden, supposed to be on apple tree duty, by the way. And in this time, he had grown pretty fond of Adam and Eve, and he was given a flaming sword to guard the entrance of the garden so they couldn't get back in. But he was concerned for them, and he decided they need to be able to defend themselves because there were predators. I mean, one of the first things you see is Adam having to scare off a lion who is trying to eat them, essentially. So Aziraphel gave them the flaming sword. Good luck, children, and, just tried to lay low and hope no one noticed that he was no longer in possession of that sword. Heaven was okay-ish with the job performance, and, he just tried to go along under that radar. So after this world's first eviction, Crowley decided to go and introduce himself to Aziraphel. And despite the fact that they were on opposite sides, they just hit it off, and you could tell they just immediately connected and had this rapport. They were both fretting about, if they had done the right thing, if it was the bad thing, and wouldn't it be funny if they both got it wrong? But that was just the beginning of their interactions, and over the centuries they bump into each other over and over again. They're getting each other out of trouble, they're helping each other out, having dinner, and generally enjoying each other's company, even though, by all rights, they really shouldn't, but they genuinely get along in and of themselves. Then you come to the arrangement. So after a while, Crowley and Aziraphel, they discovered that they were being sent to the same places. Crowley was supposed to do a temptation, and Aziraphel was supposed to go and inspire goodness, perform a miracle. And they decided that if neither of them went on these, joint assignments, then the end result would be exactly the same as if they had both done the work. So what if they just sent in reports to, their head offices, said that they did what they were supposed to do, and, the result would still be the same, and no one would be the wiser, and they wouldn't have to do the work. It was kind of a lazy solution. It was very bureaucratic. And at first Aziraphel, was like, oh no, couldn't possibly, but then later on it's implied that, yeah, that's exactly what they did end up doing. And it got to the point where they would eventually if they were headed in one particular direction and the other person, didn't really feel like going, they would cover that person's job. And so they ended up having Crowley doing a few good deeds, and, Aziraphel doing a little bit of mischief. So we fast forward in time, and we have the birth of the Antichrist, and Crowley has the responsibility of taking the newborn Antichrist and taking it to the hospital where it's going to be switched out with a human baby. But this is where the wee snag really comes into play. The Antichrist was swapped with the wrong baby, unbeknownst to Crowley. There was only supposed to be one other pregnant woman coming in who would, have her baby swapped out. But it turned out there were two couples who came in, and there was confusion, and there was issues, and then he just went off the radar. But nobody knew that. So at this point, both Crowley and Aziraphel are operating on the assumption that it went according to plan. And they're consulting with each other, and they're really comfortable with their lives on Earth. They don't want to give up everything, and they like their periodic meetings. They enjoy the fun of it. Their little bickery, half flirty interactions. So no one really wants Armageddon to come. And a plan is hatched. They decide they'll keep an eye on the Antichrist, or at least the child who they think is the Antichrist. They'll be his godfathers, and Crowley will be the bad infernal influence, and Aziraphel can be the good heavenly influence. And they were hoping that between both influences, it would essentially cancel each other out, and the kid wouldn't really be good or bad. He would just be a normal kid. They thought that this was absolutely the most best plan ever, and so, we see them doing this. And they don't discover their mistake until the kid's 11th birthday, because it was at that 11th birthday that the kid's supposed to receive a hellhound as a present, and then he named the hound, and that would kickstart the apocalypse, and, all the exciting stuff could happen. But at the kid that they had been raising at his 11th birthday party, the hellhound never showed up. Crowley gets on the phone with Hell and asks them, if they sent the hellhound on time. Like, oh yes, absolutely. And said he should be there now. And Crowley's not seeing the hellhound. He's like, oh yeah, it's there. What a good hellhound. Okay, great, wonderful, bye. And they realize there has been a huge cock up. So Crowley and Aziraphel are having to combine forces and going on their search to locate the wayward Antichrist, who, as we discover all this time, he's been growing up in a normal family with really nice parents. Nothing extraordinary. He wasn't the richest of the rich. He wasn't the poorest of the poor. He's just kind of an average, in-the-middle, nice family. And growing up in a sleepy little English village. Pretty idyllic, actually. But as we see them going through this mad search and dealing with all this stuff, we're seeing more and more that their relationship has a very comfortable, very flirtatious vibe to it, and they've also simultaneously mastered the art of bickering like an old married couple, and there's just something about them. You don't know if they've, been trying to get together all this time, or if they've been together all this time in some weird demonic angelic way. You're not sure what it is. You just know that there's love there. You can just see it. So, by this time, we, the audience, can see that war drums are just beating away. Everything's gearing up for the big showdown. Time short, Crowley and Aziraphel still can't find the Antichrist. Heaven and hell are on a complete war footing. They are ready to go. So Crowley suggests that he and Aziraphel get out of Dodge, and says, we're on our own side now. But Aziraphel doesn't see it that way. He thinks, they're trapped there. There's nowhere really to go. They have this terrible argument. They retreat unhappily, break up scene number 1. Crowley bumps into Aziraphel later on and tries to convince him again to run off with him. And Aziraphel says no, and then it's like a second breakup scene, and at this point Crowley is still determined to flee the planet, and Aziraphel is still thinking that maybe if he just gets in touch with the right people, they can stop the war. None of this has to happen. It can all be averted. But as they're going their separate ways, they're so miserable. They just look utterly bereft without each other. Then we have many shenanigans. And they finally reunite, and they catch up with the Antichrist, who's decided that he doesn't really want to destroy the world after all. He doesn't want to start Armageddon. He doesn't want to be this instrument of hell. It doesn't want to bring about the final confrontation. He just wants to be an 11-year-old kid, hang out with his friends and his dog in their treehouse in the woods, and do the normal stuff that they've already been doing. So the forces of heaven and hell are, ganging up on him, trying to really force the issue. And when the Antichrist is still not budging, his father, the devil, he rises up from the depths of hell, and he, proceeds to waggle his finger and try to make the Antichrist do his bidding. But Crowley and Aziraphel are there supporting the Antichrist, telling him that, reality is listening to him in this moment. He has all these powers that have started coming to him since he got his hellhound, and saying, you can decide how this all works out. So they're standing by him, and the kid, looks the devil right in the eye and says that he's not his real dad. He says a real father is someone who shows up and raises his kids every single day, not someone who pops in after 11 years and only because he wants to scold the kid. This absolutely changes reality, and so then that, pushes the devil back into hell where he belongs. And then you see the kids, essentially his adopted father, come in and say, what on earth is going on around here? Where have you been? And all this and that, doing the normal parent things. And, at that moment, he becomes the kid's true father. And the kid is no longer tied to this big, seesaw confrontation relationship between heaven and hell. So the world is restored to normal with a few tweaks for the better. And Crowley and Aziraphel are left contemplating of, okay, what comes next? Because both heaven and hell saw them absolutely standing against them and not, getting with the program and cooperating with everyone else. There's going to be consequences. This brings us to failed executions, the most incompetent executions ever. Because heaven and hell, they're just, they can't get through to the Almighty. The devil can't do anything about what's going on right now. So they're just going to vent all their frustrations on Crowley and Aziraphel. It's all their fault. If they hadn't, messed with the kid's mind and this and that, they could have had their glorious war and everyone would have been happy. So both sides, they kidnap their wayward operative. And they, well, actually, Crowley had a trial. Aziraphel did not. But they both get condemned to death. And Crowley's sentenced to be immersed into holy water, which should dissolve him as a demon. And Aziraphel is put into hellfire flames, which should, burn him up, and that should all be that. But it doesn't have the desired effect. We see Crowley, he's in his bathtub just kind of flicking the water, asking for a rubber duck, and just comfortable as can be, totally freaking out the other demons. And then you see Aziraphel in heaven. He steps into this column of hellfire, and he's just stretching and comfy, and then he gets this wicked look in his eye. He opens his mouth and breathes fire at the other angels who are just losing their minds over this. Heaven and hell are very confused at this point, and they're really very disturbed. They have no idea what to do, because it just seems like both Crowley and Aziraphel have completely switched sides to the point where they're no longer vulnerable to the strongest weapons of the opposing side. So both prisoners are released, and, that's the last we see of heaven and hell of this particular miniseries. It is at this point when Aziraphel and Crowley are sitting in the park, and they check to see if anyone's looking, and then they touch fingers, and you see that they had switched bodies. That was how they were able to evade their executions. It's because it wasn't actual Crowley who was in the bath. It was only Crowley's appearance. So, of course, Aziraphel was going to be able to survive holy water, and the same with Crowley with the Hellfire column. They just had swapped appearances, that was all. So they've survived, no ill effects. They know eventually that, heaven and hell is probably going to be ganging up on them in the future. But for today, things are good, everything's worked out. You can see that they're closer than ever. They're much more comfortable with their relationship. Aziraphel especially has really reached this place of acceptance of, Crowley and I, we're a team. We are on each other's side. We are our own side. And both are ready to just get back to what they're best at, living life on Earth, enjoying each other's company. And the final scene you see of them, they're having dinner at the Ritz, and their heads are together, and they're talking and just enjoying everything, and it's so, so sweet. And you have romantic music in the background, and even though their bond is not ever explicitly defined, it's the way they look at each other, it's their interactions. All of it just comes up, all these behavioral cues. It makes it very clear that the relationship is more than just a platonic friendship. It has long since blossomed into love, and a very romantic love at that. And you just left with this, oh, they're so cute feeling at the end of it all. So there's a lot of things that makes this pair lovable. But I think one of the things that makes them especially compelling is just because of how real they are. Their dynamic between each other is recognizable and it is functioning in a very natural way. We've all seen couples who behave this way towards each other, just in ordinary circumstances. Even ourselves, we might have found ourselves in partnerships with a very similar dynamic to what Crowley and Aziraphel have. It's the playful, the flirtatious, the I'm interested in you, but kind of that push and pull, ebb and flow that you see. It's this is normal. This is kind of like the married dynamic. The healthy married dynamic is what you're seeing. So despite all of the extraordinary circumstances of the story and the demonic nature of Crowley, the angelic nature of Aziraphale, there's just something about their relationship that feels very grounded and it just rings true. So one note about Aziraphale and Crowley is that because they are an angel and a demon, canonically in the story, they are without any particular sex. And in fact, their physical appearance, size, shape, what gender they appear to be, it's all just options. They can choose from it at will and just to decide how to look based on whatever is convenient for what they happen to be doing or how they like to appear. Now, both Aziraphale and Crowley, they were played by male actors in the story, but because of their relationship dynamic, that romance between the two of them would have been just as believable if it had been two actresses, or if it had been an actor and an actress. The relationship is just that consistent. It's really a mark of very strong storytelling that the audience would believe in the compatibility of the personalities and the behavioral patterns and the characters being drawn to each other in a very realistic way, so much that it would ring true no matter who they had cast in the roles. Another thing about Aziraphale and Crowley that I really like is that they confirm the beauty and value of humanity and life on Earth. We see so many stories revolving around people who are trying to be more than human. They need more power. It's not enough to have a good normal life, which is essentially what Crowley and Aziraphale were kind of, that was their pattern. They had their normal lives, as normal as what a demon and an angel could possibly have. But they were being normal. And there's something very affirming about a story of an angel and a demon who just want to live more or less like we do, and seeing the beauty of it and enjoying the good things that there are to enjoy about life. There's something really wonderful and comforting about that. And the last thing that really makes this pair lovable, that is just what I personally find cute, is that Crowley is forever calling Aziraphale angel, especially past a certain point in their relationship. More often than not, he defaults to calling him angel, which is just so adorable. And in the novel, if you decide to read it, which you really should, it's a funny read, Aziraphale always addresses Crowley as my dear. Now, you didn't see that in the miniseries. They tried to work it in, but they couldn't quite make it. But in the novel, it was absolutely there. It was always my dear. Whether they were agreeing, disagreeing, whatever was going on, it was my dear. Absolutely adorable. So I think it's pretty obvious why I love this pair, and why I'm bringing it to attention here. It's because it is probably one of the most realistic dynamics that I've seen in recent fiction lately, and I love it. I love it because they are showing there's beauty, there's value, there's romance in our daily lives. We don't have to be life-altering, world-saving people all of the time, or even any of the time. Our ability to find love and have love with one another, that is value, that is so much part of what it is to be human, and to forge a partnership like that. You want that. Someone who, whatever disagreements and bumps you have in the road, you eventually find your way back to each other, and you're happier with each other, and you have a genuine appreciation for who the other person is. And I think that's why I keep coming back to it and swooning over it. But hope you enjoyed it. If you've never read the book or never watched the miniseries, I hope you do. I hope this inspires you. Hope you enjoy the story as much as I did. It really is a good time. But I think that's it for now, and I'll see you in the next installment for the Romance in Modern Mythology next week. So, bye for now.